I will say now at the beginning, I'm not a registered financial advisor in any way, shape or form. The information that this is based on is from the ACRE information sheet, which, as you know, ACRE produce about 40 different information sheets on all the topics to do with village halls. So information sheet number 41 is called Accounting and Village Halls. So the basis of this is from the information sheet and some of the government guidance that's come out from COVID as well. There's quite a lot to go through, so hopefully if I don't explain it in full, you will be able to, when you see the slides after the event, you'll be able to read through them a little bit more at your leisure. If you feel you want to order the information sheet, it's £10 plus VAT, but a lot of the information is going to be in the slides anyway. So if we go over 12 o'clock, if you have to finish and go at 12, obviously that's fine. But if we do go over, we can spare a bit of time to answer some questions. So if you want to carry on a little bit longer, that's absolutely fine with us. But if not, we understand that you're expecting to finish at 12. Right, first, let's go on to the next slide, Emma. Just a sort of the overarching principle is that this is based on charitable village halls. And charities, as you know, are regulated by the Charity Commission under the Charities Act 2011. And when it comes to the financial side of things, it's the Statement of Recommended Practice and the Charities Accounts and Reporting Regulation. So that's a little bit about the legislation to do with finances and charities themselves. There is a lot of information. I don't know whether you already access the Charity Commission resources, but if you go on the Charity Commission website, there's lots of guidance on charity finance. Obviously, they're advising on charities that are, national big charities, right down to the small little tiny village halls in a remote village in the middle of nowhere. So a lot of the guidance is quite generic. Another thing about being a charity is that you're governed by your governing documents. And as trustees, you should be aware of your trust deed or your governing document. And not all village halls are the same. So just to say that you really need to know as a trustee what actually your governing document says. So do make sure that you check what's in your trust deeds. Next slide, Emma, please. So we're talking, about money. That's what this session is all about. It's not the most exciting of topics in my mind, but it's one of the essential things that trustees need to be on top of. So it's vitally important that you understand what your responsibilities are. So going back to, you're all trustees if you are on the Village Hall Management Committee, or whether you are the treasurer of the charity, you are classed as a trustee. Charity Commission, as I said already, there's an awful lot of information out there. This is a guide, one of their publications, which sets out the key principles of being a trustee. So it's called The Essential Trustee, your 6 key duties. So that's just an illustration of what is you're responsible for. So if you have a look at those headings, one of the key things is act in your charity's best interests. So any decisions that you make as a management committee, you have to always think that whatever the decisions are, the financial planning that you do, it's got to be in the best interests of the charity. You've got to ensure that your charity is accountable, so you've got to have the right policies and procedures in place. You're responsible for managing your charity's resources responsibly, being prudent, act with reasonable care and skill. That's vitally important. Okay, next slide, Emma. Go on to the next slide, love. Okay. Talking about your trust deed, as I said, they're not all the same, but the model acre trust deed will say in its objects that the property and the trust fund and its income shall be applied for the purposes of a village hall for the use of the inhabitants. So that is the first statement really in a typical village hall trust deed, that your main responsibilities are the trust property and its income and its trust fund. So that's what you're really there for as trustees, to be responsible for. So what is a well-managed hall? Is to make sure that you've got your financial policies and procedures in place, which obviously a village hall charity, you have got assets. If you are a freeholder, you've got the assets of the value of the hall itself and the land. So there is a huge asset there. A lot of halls are freeholders, some are leaseholders. So it is vitally important that village hall trustees have got to safeguard the trust's assets. Managing risk, that's a key responsibility. So the forward planning and budgeting on an annual basis, you know, these are your main responsibilities. So to have those financial procedures and policies in place, it's a really good guide for any decision making that the trustees make, to help that you're prudent and consistent with the objects of the charity. That's what it all comes back to, is what your charity is there for. And a village hall charity is to ensure that you are providing a facility for the benefit of your local community that is, you know, abides with legal requirements, and it is safe to use and pleasant to, you know, to actually hire. Another responsibility is to protect yourselves as trustees, officers and the public from any risk. So the other main responsibility is to ensure that the all aspects are insured correctly. So we'll go on to that later. So basically it's saying that it is good practice to have a financial policy in place, rather than seeing it just as a responsibility of the treasurer to take care of all the finances. The treasurer needs to be led by the charity rather than the treasurer just, you know, managing on their own. And I'm sure these are things that you're fully aware of. Right, so the next slide. Right, so the financial duties of the trustees. As we've already said, it's to ensure that the charity's assets are only used to support or carry out at its purposes. So if you've got your facility, you're not meant to be using it for other things rather than for the community benefit. So things like using the village hall for business purposes. You can use it for business purposes, but not, you know, there is a balance of how much it can be used for business purposes. So otherwise you could be in breach of trust as a trustee. I have come across examples whereby a village hall asset has been used by businesses and they've virtually taken over the hall and it excluded the community use. So the charity trustees were not protecting the assets and they were not following the purposes of the charity. One of them was an independent business that was running a nursery and play school, and they took over the whole use of the hall for every day of the school term, every day during the school holidays and at weekends. and they had actually excluded all of the community from using that premises. So the trustees were in breach of their duty of care. And it was a case where it was going to be reported to the Charity Commission as a serious incident. So, you know, you do have to make sure that you are following your charity's purposes. Avoid exposing the charity's assets, beneficiaries, or reputation to undue risk. So again, the reputation of the charity, if there is a serious incident, then that charity is in disrepute, and the local community have a right to complain about that. It's your duty to not overcommit and to be too ambitious, and not take proper control of the finances of the charity. So again, be aware of your responsibilities. Again, taking special care when investing or borrowing. The Trustees Act 2000 gives a general power of investing. So do check your governing document to see if there's anything that says about investing of charity funding. But charities that own the freehold, however, cannot speculate with charity assets such as land or buildings. So there's special regulations that if you do own land and buildings, you know, follow the Charity Commission guidance on investing and borrowing. Comply with any restrictions on spending funds or selling land. If it's designated land, there are quite a few stringent regulations with the Charity Commission, and there is a process to be followed if it is a case of selling designated charitable land, but that's a different issue altogether. But it's being aware of the fact that if it is a freehold, you are actually sitting on an asset, and you're holding it on, it's being held on trust on behalf of the local community. So any of the decisions that you make as charity trustees, you have to bear in mind that you are accountable to the local community. Right. Legal obligations, like we said, going back to that essential trustee, all of those 6 legal obligations, it is the fact that you have to be aware that you know, they can be challenged. They can be challenged in the court. It's something that I haven't come across in the case of a village hall, but obviously larger charities and trustees of larger charities, there will be examples where in the news that you will have heard of where they have been taken to court. But it's very rare. I'm not aware of it happening in a smaller village hall type charity. So the first of your legal is, when it comes to the financial side of things, is keeping of records. So most small village hall charities will be keeping simple accounts, which you're probably aware of. The basics, keeping records of payments, invoices, receipts for cash, income, you know, making sure you've got the right processes in place, paying in slip for money given to the treasurer, the amount, the name of the group, copy of the hire agreement, which we'll talk about later as well, writing down check numbers and keeping a paper trail, which is, you know, quite good practice anyway. Keeping bank statements, a lot of bank statements will be online. You may not get a paper statement, but you've got that choice to request paper statements if you do still want them. Good practice for the bank statement to actually be sent, if you are getting paper statements, it's good practice for the bank statement to be sent to the chairperson rather than to the treasurer. And that's just to give another layer of checking that the information is not being held purely by the treasurer. So it gives you that opportunity for the chairperson to keep a good eye on a monthly basis of what the state of the financial account is. If you're still using checkbooks, keep obviously copies of the checkbooks and paying in books. Good practice to have a petty cash book, and make sure that your treasurer knows the right handling of petty cash so that it is accounted for and it's not used freely as, you know, money that is handed over to the treasurer from, say, a fundraising event or, you know, ticket door sales, is that they account for that money and it is banked rather than that cash in hand being used as petty cash, because then it will not reconcile with any bank statements. So any cash that the treasurer receives from an event has to be paid into the bank account in full and kept separate from the petty cash. So it's a good idea to have some amount, whichever the trustees decide to set what level they would like to have as petty cash. It could be £50, it could be £100, it could be less, but that's down to your discretion. Treasurer will have to make sure that they're keeping bookkeeping, either electronic or paper copies. We'll come on to that. And it's responsibility again of keeping minutes of AGM, annual statement of accounts, annual report, independent examination report. That should be IE, not EI. I apologise on that last line. And to ensure that all of the above forms of keeping financial records, all of that, it's kept for 6 years. So if you know, you've changed treasurer in the last few years, make sure that the copies of all the accounts are passed over to the new treasurer, or they may be kept in locked up in a filing cabinet in the village hall. But don't just rely on somebody to know that they've got to keep the accounts for 6 years. It's got to be explained, it's got to be in the finance policy, but that is a legal requirement. So trustees do need to be aware of that. Next page, please, Emma. Okay. So preparing charity accounts. Most village halls, as we have said, simple accounts. So charities below income of £250,000, legally you can do simple accounts. You can choose to use the accrual method, and in some cases the trust deed requires it, that you have to have accrual accounts. So again, it is important that you have to follow what it says in your trust deed. That is paramount over what the regulations suggest, if you see what I mean. So if your trust deed states that you have to have a certain accounting type, you follow the instructions in the trust deed, even if the regulations say you don't have to have it. Follow what it says in the trust deed. There is no set mandatory format for the simple accounts, but there is a pro forma on the Charity Commission website. It's called Pro Forma CC16. There is also a package that I'm going to talk about later as well, which is based on the simple accounts, and it's tailored for the village hall setup. So that might be interesting if you've not got an online account package. We'll move on to that and talk about that. So for larger charities, mandatory for charities with an income above £250,000. And if you're into that sort of income level, it's recommended that you do get professional financial advice. And again, there is a Charity Commission pro forma for that, CC17. However, if you are a small village hall charity, but you have become a corporate charity, and I don't know if any of you here have converted to a charitable incorporated organisation, or short for a CIO. If you are a corporate charity, you have to prepare accrual accounts, and it doesn't matter what your income level is. So even if it's below £250,000 and you are a CIO, then unfortunately the accounts have to be, you know, a little bit more scrutinised than it is for an unincorporated charity. And I must say, most charities are unincorporated village hall charities, but it's the trend now for more and more to want to become a corporate body. But that's one of the key things you need to consider, is that you would be then required to do accrual accounts. Okay, next slide, Emma. Right, so when you have done the end of year accounts, it's a requirement that they are externally examined. So for most charities under that threshold of £250,000, this can be done by an independent examiner. Over that threshold, then it would have to be professionally audited. There is a pro forma again on the Charity Commission website for an independent examiner's report. So if you know somebody that's going to do the independent examination but doesn't quite know how to do the format, they go on the Charity Commission website. It's CCIER, Independent Examiner Report, the initials. So if you Google that or put it in the Charity Commission search engine, it will take you to that pro forma. So when you are submitting your annual report to the Charity Commission, the independent report or the audit has to be already in place so that can be uploaded when you are doing your annual report. Again, your trust deed may require a full audit. Again, check what your trust deed is saying. So whatever the income level is, if your trust deed is saying you have got to do a full audit, then you have to follow that rather than relying on the threshold. Most halls obviously are below that £250,000 mark. And I don't know what people pay, but you wouldn't want to pay any more than probably maximum £300. I mean, that's probably quite generous for an independent examination. So if you are relying on an accountant to do it, you know, it's not necessary to pay a great deal of money if a professional person may be charging you too much for an independent examination for a small village hall charity. You know, simple accounts, it should be quite straightforward. If you've got the paper trail there, it's quite basic and straightforward for them to do that examination. I have heard of independent examiners and auditors charging a lot more money this year because they know that village hall charities have got the £10,000 grant. So they think perhaps we're going to have a bit of that, thank you. And maybe. So it has increased that, you know, they are finding that they're being charged quite a lot more this year. So do be aware of that. It shouldn't really make any difference or increase the amount of work to do the independent examination. And I do know of, if you do need the name of somebody, I can, you know, if you want to contact me later, I can give you a contact for somebody that can do independent examinations. It is good, however, if you know somebody, or if one of the trustees recommends somebody to do the independent examination, then it's better if two trustees know that person rather than the one. It just gives a little bit more scrutiny on the person that would be doing it. Right, next slide, Emma, please. So reporting requirements, this is another legal requirement, and this is just giving you the thresholds of the income levels of what you need to do when you're submitting your annual return. So there is government guidance again on how to do this, how to prepare an annual return. You have Obviously, you will have a Charity Commission password. If you're a registered charity, it has to be done online. You have to select the annual return and have ready PDF copies of your annual report, your accounts and independent examiners' reports, and names of the current charity trustees as well. And I'm sure you're aware that you have to return this within 10 months of the end of your financial year. Now, because of COVID, people may, and I've not heard anybody querying this with me, so I'm not quite sure if people are having problems with getting reports done or audits done. If a charity is really struggling and they can't get all the information to submit their annual report, they can request a filing extension with the Charity Commission if really necessary. I don't think they want charities to do that. If really necessary, you can email the Charity Commission and request an extension for submitting your annual report. And do check every year, because the questions that they ask each year can change. So I know from 2018, 19 and 20, they did change the questions slightly. So you can go on, I think, and check what the questions are going to be in advance of submitting. And even if you are not required to submit your accounts, it's still a legal duty to still prepare them. So you say, okay, you know, we're under £10,000 income. All we need to do is send our total figure of income and expenditure. Doesn't matter about preparing the accounts. That's not the case. You are still meant to prepare them properly so that anybody in your local community can request a copy, and then the charity have to give them a copy if they are, if anybody wants to check, even if it's not a requirement by the Charity Commission, it's still a legal duty. Okay. So other legal obligations, which we've just said, as well as sending in your annual return, annual report, is to say what your village hall activities, you know, what's happened over that last year. So that's still a requirement. Legal duties, it's got down here, it's to have a reserves policy, and we're going to talk about that later as well. It must be produced for AGM and made available to the public, so that if anybody asks, have you got a reserves policy? Also, when you submit your annual return and it says, have you got a reserves policy? They may ask you, why haven't you got one? It's almost like saying, if you haven't, well, give us a good reason. We need the rationale for not having a reserves policy in place. It's just to safeguard the charity. It's just a, you know, another way of the Charity Commission ensuring that the charity is acting in the best interests of the charity. Documents available to the public on request. So when it says that, that's just the annual report and the annual accounts. You do not have to show the minutes of meetings, just AGM minutes, annual report and annual accounts. Anything that happens at the village hall committee meetings between the AGMs does not have to be shown to the general public, unlike statutories and parish councils. And another legal requirement is that if you're a registered charity, that you show your charity number on all your paperwork, letter headings, things like that, checkbooks, things like that. So next page. I'm just showing you this picture here. It's one of the ACRE publications, Your Village Hall Management Committee, which is in there. They have a page, there's a model role of the treasurer. So it's got a list of the duties, typical duties for a chairman, secretary, but it's got all the information needed for a treasurer. So if you wanted to have, say, a job description or something, that's quite handy because it gives you a bullet point list of the role of the treasurer. So that's a publication you can purchase from RAD if you do want one. Financial policy. Why have a financial policy? It's to guide and set out how the charity will manage the finances of the hall. There is a sample finance policy in the Village Hall information sheet on accounting. That's number 41, and at the back of there is a sample financial policy. So it sets out a good framework for how the Village Hall Management Committee will make decisions. So you're not making decisions on the hoof. It should be developed and worked alongside a good business plan. So good practice for any committee is financial planning integrated with a wider organisational planning and management, risk assessment and a framework within which all decisions can be made. So, you know, again, must act in the best interests of the charity and be prudent and careful at all times. So you may, it's like any other policy, you can review it on an annual basis and you can develop and change it over time. So especially this year, it might be a good time to look at how much, for example, in the finance policy, you are setting for reserves. You might, after COVID, think that you need to have more reserves as a charity to make you more resilient in the future. So again, you're reviewing what the level of reserves are that you're going to set. Yeah, I've got EG, but I've not put an EG down on there. But that's what it is. The EG would be, after COVID, you may want to increase your reserves margin. Right, okay, next slide. And it's also good practice that as the treasurer needs to report to the Village Hall Management Committee as a whole. All financial decisions are the responsibility of all of the trustees. It's not down to the treasurer to make financial decisions. The treasurer is purely to be guided by the Village Hall Management Committee as a whole, and they are guided by the finance policy. So there are these safeguards in place. But it is very important that the treasurer does not make financial decisions on their own, because the ultimate responsibility would fall back onto all of the trustees. So at every meeting you have, it should be on your agenda to have an update on where the finances are. So the trustees would agree the update, the monthly statement, or however often you meet, quarterly statement, and the chair would sign it, date it, and it would be minuted that the trustees agree, you know, have read and agree the financial statement is correct. Another good thing, and I don't know how many village halls actually do prepare a budget, but that is good practice to look in advance, set out your financial objectives for the year ahead, and you'd start with the end of year balances. You'd carry those forward, your balances. So you are anticipating where through the year, when you're setting the budget, that your income, you know, is it going to be even income throughout the year, or are you going to have a big fundraising events, summer fetes or Christmas fairs? You know, you can anticipate in advance where you may be getting extra income coming in. You should know where your main costs are going to be throughout the year. So your main utility bills, your insurance, any leases and licenses that you've got to pay for. You know in advance when those expenses are going to fall. You may want to, obviously, you've got to account for an increase in inflation costs. Are you worried that you may lose, for example, one of your groups, user groups? Is that going to be a risk? So you've got to financially prepare for that. if you think that you're going to have a lower income over the year, what can you do? You know, have you got to increase your marketing to, you know, compensate for any potential loss of income? Have you got to do a bigger fundraising campaign? So things like that, that's how you set your budget on a month by month basis. And it's something that you can then compare as you go through the year. You compare what your income and expense is, compare it to the budget, and you can see whether you're keeping yourselves on track or not. And if you do have a finance policy that states where the charity would like to be financially. So, for example, you know, if you want to ensure that your income exceeds expenditure every year by, you know, 5 or 10%, how are you going to achieve it? Because that's what's in the policy. The budget, you can plan ahead. How can you set the budget and what actions you need to take to you know, to hopefully, it is only an estimate. You can't guarantee that what you're planning is going to happen. Look at COVID, that's, you know, something that's come in and it's an emergency. It's thrown everybody's plans out this year and, you know, possibly for the next financial year as well. So you look to see how you can increase your costs, but also how you can reduce your costs as well. So you might have to look at how you become more energy efficient. You might want to look at changing your energy supplier. You may want to look at maybe, are we getting the best quote on our insurance? So again, you've got to, it's your responsibility to keep a handle on the income and the expenditure. Next slide, Emma, please. Right, so the different types of accounts. You don't have to hold all of these different types of accounts, but current account is your general unrestricted funds, and everybody would have a general account. It's good practice to have a reserves account for the reasons we've said already. That's for unforeseen costs, emergencies. You may have restricted funds, and it's better to keep your reserves separate from the restricted funds. They're two different things. So, for example, if you are raising money for rewiring the hall, or you need an extension, or you're planning to have a new roof or something, or a new boiler, you're saving money for a specific purpose, and that may be building up over a number of years. So you're restricting that money, and it could be that you've got a grant, you've applied for a grant, and the money has been granted to you specifically for that purpose. So it's restricted. You can't use that money as a reserves fund. Otherwise, you've got to explain to your grant holder, and they most likely would want the money back. Or you may have had a fundraising campaign and saying to the public, we are raising money, we need to rewire the hall. And the people have given money in goodwill because they're putting it towards a capital project for the hall. So you can understand why you cannot use that money for general reserves. So it's a good idea to have at least those three different types of accounts. A very small hall, it's questionable how you managed to do that, but it would be the good practice, especially if you've got projects on the go and you need to raise capital funding to meet those projects. Very unlikely to have an endowment fund, but there is a possibility that if, for example, a local person had donated or bequeathed in trust for the village hall some capital funding as an endowment fund, it means that the village hall cannot actually access the capital funding that they've been given, but they can use the interest. They can invest that money, that endowment fund. It can be invested, and the charity then has the benefit of the income only. So I've not come across a hall where that's happened, but it's just to be aware that if you were left money in an endowment fund, that's what that would mean. Okay, next. Right. Now, I think most people nowadays are going on to online banking. It's not essential. I'm sure there are some people still doing it in a bookkeeping type of book. But that seems to be the way that finances are going. If you have a trustee, the trustee takes on the role. It is the responsibility of the whole committee to ensure that whoever is responsible for online banking has got the right internet security in place. You can't just rely on the trustee to say, oh yes, we're fine, I've got antivirus on my computer, because it's the responsibility of all the trustees. So you would really have to make sure that the person who is doing on the online banking is kept safe and secure. And if the village hall charity can afford to buy a laptop, and put the package on there, that would be fine. But again, I doubt whether that is actually happening, maybe in larger village halls. But you've got to think about, you can't put the responsibility on the treasurer's shoulders. And there's things like the GDPR, data protection information as well. So it's responsibility of everybody on the committee. This is a common problem with any small charity, and it comes up quite a lot, that people say you have problems with the banks and getting the dual authorization for having a bank account. Maybe you've had the same issues, I don't know. But if it's a case of you're going into a branch, if there's still a branch locally that's still open, go into the branch with the current signatory, along, if this is possible, go in with the new signatories and make sure that they've got 2 forms of ID each, and a copy of the minute book authorising that these 2 people are going to be the new signatories. Otherwise, it's just, there's no evidence to say that they are the new signatories. It's good to go in with the minute book. If it's telephone banking, talk through making the changes online while someone uploads the necessary information, so that they're making sure that they're doing that process correctly. Online banking, again, difficult to get the dual authorization for online banking. So either find a bank that allows for it, that they're accustomed to charities and they know what it is to have dual authorization, or this has been suggested by a colleague of mine in Edinburgh, establish a procedure, again, if it's in your finance policy, that whoever is treasurer and they're wanting to get authorization to make payments, before they do that, if it's a requirement that they have to have prior authorization from 1 or 2 other trustees. Sorry, I've lost the page. Something's come up on my page. I do apologise. I've got half a screen. Is yours okay?
No.
No.
You got? Oh, it's gone.
That's okay.
That's
Okay.
fine. That's absolutely fine. So if you are the treasurer, and just as a safety, if you send, say, an invoice or a screenshot PDF to 1 or 2 other named trustees, who can then check that yes, that payment has got to be made, and they agree it, or email back, say yes, we authorise this payment, then the treasurer can use that as a backup to say I've had authorisation that I can make this payment as an online payment. I think I've heard that the CAF and Lloyds both offer electronic dual authorisation. So that's a couple of banks I know that will do. I've been asked, why is it so difficult? And I have been told it's down to anti-money laundering legislation. So I don't think the banks are just being awkward over this. It is down to legislation that they are required to insist on the dual dual authorization. Another tip is that if a new signatory is already a customer of the bank that the charity is banking with, that can make it a little bit more easier because the bank knows that person is a customer already. If you're having major problems with banks, we would just say, okay, move to a different bank. And you can contact RAD for some information on banks that will support charities and have an understanding of what charities have to do. Right, next page, Emma, please. So this is quite a key thing when you're looking at finances, because, you know, hiring out your hall is the principal source of income. So it's a critical factor when you're setting your budget. It's working out, you know, how many hirings we're going to have through the year, but what price, what charge should we be setting? But you've got to cover your running costs. So it's weighing up that balance, isn't it? Too low, your costs will not be covered. Too high, and hirers will go elsewhere. Now, not all village halls have got their own unique circumstances. It's where you're located, it's the facilities you're offering to your customers, the size of the hall, are there other competitors in the area? So there's no set amount that we can say is a standard fee for a village hall, because you've got your own unique circumstances. So it is the trustees have got to weigh up what they think is the right fee for their particular circumstances and for their community as well. So let's go to the next slide. This is a really, really simple and very basic way of setting how to work out costs. So depending on whether you're hiring out the hall by session, like for the whole morning, the afternoon or the evening, or whether you let it out by the hour, whichever method you are using, you can count up how many sessions or hours the hall is being used per week. So you've got an idea of the uses per week, and times that by 52 weeks per year to get an idea what the income you are expecting for the year. So it gives you that total figure. Calculate your total running costs, and if it's a case of allowing for increases, if you're setting it as a budget, work out what your running costs and divide that figure by your total income figure above, and that will give you a ballpark figure that you can set your higher charge at. And if anybody does challenge you, if they say, well, we think your fees are a little bit high, you can say, actually, no, we've done the calculations. If we set the fee any lower than that, we cannot be sustainable. We can't operate. I mean, in essence, you are a charity, but you are running as a business, and you have got to be sustainable. You've got to keep going. Not for profit doesn't mean that you should be in the red. Not for profit means you're not making use of that profit for business purposes, but you still are a business, and you're classed as a business, obviously, for business rates, but you are a business and you have to be sustainable.
Can I come in here, please?
Yes.
It says divide number of sessions hours used by total annual costs. Surely it should be divide number of sessions used into annual costs.
Yeah, divide the number of sessions hours.
So let's say your total costs are 5,000 a year and you have 50 sessions, that's £100, right?
Yes, you divide, yes, you're right.
If you're doing it the other way, it's totally wrong.
Yes, it is. That's right. The way you're saying is correct. So yeah. I apologise. Now, all of this is explained in our model hiring agreement. Yeah. Some of you may already be operating to the ACRE model hiring agreement. Our last training session was to do with hiring agreement. but that's explained there. But it's just basic business common sense. In essence, your hire charges should cover your costs at the end of the year. And if they're not, you either increase your hire charge or you look to increase the number of bookings and user groups or reduce your cost. I mean, it's just the basics of good bookkeeping anyway. But it may be that you just need to do a new marketing campaign, work out where you've got capacity to have more groups coming in. You know, who can we target, so that, you know, you might get new user groups in the afternoon where you've had lots of vacancies in the afternoon. You know, it's good management of your facility. You know your facility, you know how many rooms you've got, you know what your facilities are, so you have to target where you do your marketing for that reason. Okay, I think we are about coffee break time. Yes, we are. So any questions from that first session? No, I don't think anything's come up on the chat. Nothing's come up on the chat, so okay. So if we have, say, 10 minutes maximum, coffee break, comfort break, and if you do have any questions, I'll be back a bit earlier than that. So if you want to pose any questions or put it on the chat, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, so we'll come back for 5:15.
And we can authorise, 2 of us can go online and authorise any amount, buybacks, any payment buybacks or anything. It works wonderfully well, but it has to have 2 signatories who verify the backs authorisation. So as I say, it works well, and it's definitely 2 people who authorise it, not just the one. It won't go through with just one authorisation.
That's useful to know. That's very good. Yes, thank you, Heather. Yeah.
Et will also have an account with that. It works well, but they're not so good at the automatic checking when people are coming in and out, whether it's going to the right account. They're not part of that system.
Oh, we've never had that problem.
We've had a hirer not held back money because you couldn't guarantee it was the right going to the right account.
Dear.
We got round it, but
yeah, I mean,
I think that's probably because nobody's heard of Unity.
Yeah. Alan, what did you want to say?
I was going to say that I'm sort of taking over as treasurer of our village hall at some point in the near future, but we currently bank with the Royal Bank of Scotland, and they are trying to encourage customers to leave through a bank switching scheme. Yeah. Where if you switch to a particular bank, the new bank will give you a payment of £1,250. I mean, we are trying, we're trying to do this with the Co-op bank, but having real difficulties. I mean, I started the process last September and we still haven't done the switch yet. And I can't get in touch with the Co-op bank to find out what's happening. So it's making people aware that if they do decide to go through this sort of switching process, that it's not as straightforward as it's made out to be, and it seems to be taking a very long time.
I don't know what it's like inherited. No.
It does take a long time. I've done a Co-op switch, which has gone through this week, that I started on the 25th of September.
Right, about the same sort of time as us then, yeah.
Yeah, I've done a Metro one that transfers on the 31st of January, which I started first week in October, and Parish Council have gone to TSB, which was quite quick actually.
Right, I mean the problem we're finding with the Co-op bank is that you can't contact them online, and when you phone them, I mean I've been on the phone several times and you're on the phone for at least half an hour.
Yeah.
And you can't get connected.
That is the need to do. Yeah. I think if I can get a list of banks that others have found good, can recommend, we can circulate that at a bit of a later date. So it's useful to hear, but I think all sorts of banks are open, but I think they're on limited staffing levels.
Yeah.
A lot of people are working from home, like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they're all
I
saying
think
that because of the COVID
delay.
situation, that is delayed things. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Could I suggest that if anybody's got any words of wisdom that they'd like to share with the group, to perhaps just put it in the chat function, because the chat will also be saved. So we'll be able to have an account of that. So that would be useful.
okay, thanks. That's great, Emma. Thank you very much. So, okay, I think most people are back. So we'll start with the next slide. It is about avoiding. Best to be prepared and avoid problems in advance. So obviously, having your finance policy is a good way of, looking at what the potential risks are in advance and try and avoid any of these things going wrong. So like we've already mentioned, handling cash, which many small village halls are handling cash. Keep a paper trail of cash transactions and don't get it mixed up with the petty cash, as we said. Payment of trustees, being aware of what you can and can't do, and also making sure that your governing document or your trustee has any restrictions or anything in there about the payment of trustees as well. But the Charities Act, you can look that up on the Charity Commission website, when there's a slide later on talking about that as well. Cheque signing, obviously that's an issue we've talked about. It's 2 signatories. Obviously people that are not related, don't sign cheques in advance, don't sign a blank cheque. Always sign against the invoice. So whoever the signatories are, they need to have sight of the invoice, and it needs to be initial dated with a cheque number, so it's sort of backing up the paper trail all the time if possible. Related persons, so you don't want your signatories to be all related or in the same family, and that includes cohabitees, so they don't have to necessarily legally be related. And also an independent examiner should be known by more than one trustee as well. I think we've already mentioned that. So and not a relative of one of the trustees, but known by a trustee. We've talked about keeping good records. This is probably the best way of avoiding a problem, and it's legally required to keep that for 6 years. Keep a paper trail from source to the final account, and it makes it a lot easier when the independent examiner has to do the their report for your annual return. Now, the hiring agreement, which we touched on earlier, is actually a signed contract. So once somebody is hiring the hall, then it's get them to sign it, because it is a contractual agreement between 2 parties. You're agreeing to provide a safe village hall, and they are agreeing to use it according to your terms and conditions and to pay for that usage. So it is a signed contract. If you are getting a deposit, and that has to be paid back, depending on how you manage the handling of the deposit, then deposits paid back into the same bank account that it came from. So if you're asked to pay it back to a different account, you would then think, actually, alarm bells might start ringing there. So all of these things could be in your finance policy, because this will guide future trustees and future treasurers to show that there is a framework of the rules and regulations, really, that's managing the finances of the charity, and it's putting these safeguards in place. Bank statements, we've said ideally send to the chairman, paper copy, and then the copy to the treasurer. And it's another level of safeguarding the charity, that the actual treasurer is not taking control of all the finances. And it's very easy in small charities for people to say, oh, it's nothing to do with me, just let the treasurer get on with it. He knows what he's doing, or she knows what she's doing. But it's not, it's everybody's responsibility. So everybody, statements need to be seen by the chair and talked about at every committee meeting. I can give an example of where this has gone wrong. Quite a big charity a local one, but bigger than a village hall, I would say. And it's about 10 years ago that the treasurer was a local respected solicitor in the town. And I think the rest of the trustees thought, he's a solicitor, he knows what he's doing, and they let him get on with the finances. And I don't think it was discussed at when they met at committee meetings. And quite a lot of money was embezzled from that particular charity. So it's a lesson to be learned that whoever the person is, whatever professional status they are, it should not be left to the treasurer to have that handle on the charity's money. It's not acting prudently. It's definitely not duty of care. You're in breach of trust. And, you know, it's just not the way for any charity to operate. But just take that as a, you know, things can go wrong even when you think they are respectable people. So again, finance policy will avoid any of those problems arising. And the last one there, payment to employees. As you know, you should be employing, if you do employ, you know, a cleaner, caretaker, and payment is made, they've got to be properly employed, never cash. You know, charity should issue a pay slip showing the gross wage and any deductions. You should have a P45 from the previous employer and follow HMRC procedures to do with tax and national insurance. So all of these things that we're talking about, there is guidance, there is information. As I've already said, the ACRE information sheets, there are 41 different sheets. So every topic, whether it's to do with employment, paying of VAT, you know, hiring agreements, there is information that you can access. We do, unfortunately, we have to charge for them, but there is information. It is good value, and it saves, you know, helps to overcome having any of these problems in the future. Right, next slide, Emma, please. So payment of trustees. Prior to the Charities Act 2011, it was not allowed without Charity Commission permission to actually reimburse one of the charity trustees for any services that they may provide. Since Charities Act 2011, it has eased it a little bit. There are some provisions in there that will allow it under certain circumstances. So as long as the trustees are aware that they have to follow a procedure. Clearly, if there is one of the trustees that is providing a service to the village hall, they have to declare an interest and withdraw from the meeting. That's obvious that they can't take part in discussions relating to any employment issues. But it has to be shown that that person is chosen for the right reasons, that they may be the only person in the local area that is capable of doing that, that there are very reasonable fee that they're charging to do it. It is in the best interest of the charity for that work to be done. And if they minute that and rationalise it and conclude that that particular trustee is the best person to be employed to do that particular piece of work, that is a legal thing to do. But it is following that process to make sure that you're not in breach of trust and paying a trustee without following the guidance. Okay, right. Just close that now, just checking the chat. Okay, next page, Emma, please. So if after, you know, carefully considering where problems can arise, sometimes things still do go wrong. However hard you try and avoid it, they can do. If it's a really, really serious, say, for example, the embezzlement issue, it is a serious incident, or if it's suspected criminal activity, you have to report it to the Charity Commission. You know, it's your duty. You can't just say, let's keep it quiet. Don't let the public know about this. You know, we know we've made a mistake, but let's hush hush about it and the problem will go away. You know, you shouldn't do that, and I'm sure you wouldn't do that, but there is a mechanism on the Charity Commission website about reporting serious incidents or near incidents. I think it's a little bit that Charity Commission like to know if something nearly went wrong, but it could have been a serious thing, because it gives them information about the charity, but it also gives them information about what potentially can go wrong. So don't be afraid to do that. It's better to do it rather than not do it, and it comes back to bite the trustees at a later date. If it is a criminal thing to do with the finances or any criminal action, again, you must report it to the police and action fraud. So it could be an online crime. I mean, that's the most, you know, one of the biggest crimes at the moment is online fraud. So action fraud, if you fear that anything has gone wrong, you know, there's been a breach in your internet security, you think that you may have been scammed in any way, do report it to action fraud, and you can do that online. It could be to do with loss of charity money or assets, unauthorized payment of a trustee. So if you think, you know, back to that slide, previous slide, talking about if you've put the right measures in place and rationalized why and minuted why you did make a payment of a trustee, and if suddenly there is an unauthorized payment of a trustee, that is classed as a, you know, quite serious, and the other trustees need to address that, because it is charity money that you're talking about. So again, if it's a large amount or a serious amount, you would get the police involved. If it's something that you can perhaps manage locally, if it's a very small amount, you may be able to manage that, but a large amount, then you would get the police, report that to the police because of any criminal activity. But also, it's harm to your charity as well. It can, you know, the reputation to your charity is at risk. So if you're not handling a problem in the correct way, then it's not looking good on the trustees, the people that are managing the charity, and the reputation will obviously be affected by that. If you are seen to be handling it in the right way, get the police involved, reporting it to the Charity Commission, open and transparent about anything that goes wrong, then your reputation should not be affected, hopefully, depending on what the issue was. Other criminal activity, e.g. attempts to use charity for money laundering. So if you've not got good practices in place, if you're not regularly reporting back to the Village Hall Management Committee so that they may be able to identify if there are issues before they're building up over a long period of time, if it's checked on a regular basis, it's mechanisms to reduce any of these risks. And you are, I don't like saying it, but as an unincorporated charity, the trustees are liable at the end of the day. You are individually liable for the actions of the charity. So it's in everybody's interest, you know, you're in your own interests to make sure that the policies are in place. And there's the contact website for action fraud. I actually had to report something myself to action fraud last year when I had a problem with my internet provider, and I'd gone onto a scam website, and I was scammed myself, so I reported that to action fraud. Nothing to do with the charity, that was my own personal dealings, and I did feel very silly about it, but I did report it to action fraud, and they were very great. You know, they do like to know what incidents happen and frequency of incidents. Okay, next page, Emma. I've just put this in here. I mean, it's obvious that the village hall has to have insurance, and it is a requirement in your trust deed to make sure that the assets of the charity are properly insured, and it is one of your public, your legal duties to make sure that the insurance is in place. So those are the three main types of insurance, especially if you are freehold and leasehold, building and contents, public liability. You don't have to have this, but it's another option that you may want to have an insurance that covers public liability of your hirers. It's not mandatory to have that, but a lot of the bespoke village hall policies now automatically will include hirers' public liability. So it's worth checking what policy you've got, what it says in your insurance. Otherwise, if you have got groups coming in that are not a business or not a charity themselves, if it's, say, a party or an individual group of people, they're very unlikely to have public liability insurance for the activities that they are providing. A business should do. But if you have an insurance policy that covers it automatically, it's just another backup, and it's just another way of being financially aware of what the risks are to the charity itself. And there is an information sheet, obviously, on insurance as well. Okay, so next slide. Right, the next 6 or 7 slides have been sent to me by a colleague in Cumbria. And he set up this, it's an online package. So this is just a demonstration. I haven't used it personally. I'm aware of it. I've got no written notes on it apart from these slides, but I just wanted to demonstrate what an online accounting package looks like. I mean, this is not, there are other ones out there, and how it can help the treasurer if they did online banking, wanted to do it, not online, but if they wanted to do it electronically rather than paper copy. This was funded, I don't know, I think it was perhaps Big Lottery funded, called the BOSS project, and it's called Easy Accounts. And it's based on a package, Personal Finance Manager, Ace Money Lite. So I think it had got good credentials when it was set up. It's easy to use, and it's just like an electronic cash book. It's a good way of recording every single transaction, and it's automated so that when you want to have say a monthly report, it will print out a monthly report, it will do your annual report, it will allow reconciliation with the bank statement, enables quick and simple searches for each transaction by date, who's made the payment, what group was using the hall, what type of activity, what type of payment or income it was it fundraising, was it hall hire, all those different variables. I think you can set the package to make it bespoke to what your needs are. So we'll go on to the next slide. I think every transaction or every entry, once it's set up, once you've got it loaded and it's set up on your computer, then for everything that's incoming or outgoing, you have to just fill in what you call a transaction form. I don't think there's all sorts of variables and options of how you set this up. So it looks like at the top, whatever the transaction form is, it's whether you're withdrawing money, depositing money, transferring between bank accounts. So that's at the top there. You've got a drop-down menu, and you will put in whatever different types of bank accounts you may have. It may be that you've got your general account, a reserves account, or a restricted fund account. So who's paying the money? Because it's a deposit. So this particular transaction form is for somebody paying, payee. So you will have a drop-down list of all the hiring groups and potential people that will be paying money to the Village Hall charity. Category, you again will be able to set what categories you want in the package. So there's an example, is it hall hire, insurance, maintenance costs, for example, wages. So you tailor it to your own specific needs in this case. It looks like there's another box at the side. You may have different rates of hire or something like that. So there's different options you can do to set it up. And then the bottom box where it says comment on the left-hand side, down that list on the left, you can then just put in as a reminder what it was for example, you know, the date. Well, it's got date on the right-hand side, but you know, how many hours and at what charge you were charging for that session. So it looks like it's quite a simple way of entering that data. So that's just an enlarged picture of that last entry. So it's got the date on the right-hand side. I don't know if that actually means the check number. No, because it's a deposit, isn't it? Oh, yeah, it could be check number. I'm not quite sure, but there's a drop-down menu there and the amount. So it does actually look quite a simple way of entering the data. I don't know if anybody's using a package to do their accounting already. Okay. This is sort of been made, adapted, bespoke for Village Hall. So whenever there's a drop-down menu, it will be all the types of things that Village Halls, you know, income and expenditure types of transactions they would be. So if you went for a generic accounting package, it's not been designed bespokely for the types of transactions that a Village Hall would do. This page again is showing a larger, you know, a bit like the balance of all the payments made over a certain period of time. So that looks like it's payments made from the 1st of January to the end of March. So that's a 3-monthly snapshot of income and expenditure, like you would get on a bank statement, I guess. This is a typical screen view, and down the left-hand side, there's lots of different buttons to go into there, where you can edit the transaction, delete the transaction, download the transaction, balance account, all sorts of different options. You can, you know, look at the current monthly report, last 30 days report. There's different options and you can tailor it to your needs. So that's an example of what you can draw down from that spreadsheet. So if you wanted to get the annual statement of income and expenditure to send to the Charity Commission, it will automatically do that for you. And it says that you can copy it either into a Word document or Excel document for specific presentation purposes. If you're doing a presentation to the trustees or to an AGM, you know, this is the annual report, you may be presenting it at the AGM. You can have it in different formats to do that. I've not actually used this, but it has been used widely. So I believe probably a lot more than that now. When these slides were set up, over 1,000 community groups use this programme all across England. I know it's been made, they made the package that it was available to any village hall based in England. So it may be something that you want to consider. But if you do want to get hold of that, just let me know. You can I think you can either download it or you can get copies, I think at £5 a copy, something like that. It's very cheap to get an actual hard copy of that. So it says if you order 2 copies, one for the treasurer and one for your secretary to keep in a safe place, might be a good idea. Again, treasurers come and go, they may move away, they may forget to leave the package with the other trustees. So maybe having 2 copies would be a good idea. So that's down to individual halls, and whether you'd have to assess whether that would make it easier for you as a charity. But it looks like it would be quite a good option. Right, so that's about that online package, if anybody is interested. So just want to mention about these little card readers, again, especially with COVID and, you know, people not being allowed to touch anything, and people are meant to pay not with cash, they're meant to be paying by card, contactless card. So you've got the option now of getting these small card readers. Obviously, we're in lockdown, you're not having events. As we come out of lockdown, we don't quite know what the restrictions are going to be. It's going to be a very slow, probably back to the tier levels, a very slow gradual coming out of COVID. But in the future, I think we're all going to operate and work a little bit differently. People will get more accustomed to not handling cash and would rather have card payment by contact. Yes, we will send the details. We'll circulate all the information about that software when we send out the slides and things, Martin. So yes, you'll get all of that information. So if you haven't heard about these contactless card readers, they're becoming more popular, and I do know some village halls are beginning to use this sort of payment, you know, receiving payments now. So just to have that little device there where the picture is, this is one make, there are other makes. So this is just an example of the one called Sum Up. There are other makes available. So I'm not advertising this one over any other make. There is an example there. I think a little thing like that, I don't know if they're £20 to £30 to buy. So they're not expensive to buy. There's no ongoing rental of it. It's just a little device that you have. But there is a small charge for every single transaction that takes place. Your hall, I think it does rely on having Wi-Fi. So you'd have to consider that. I think it can be connected to smartphones if people are paying with the smartphones. And I think there is an app that can be linked up with the Sum Up. So if you've got a poor mobile signal or haven't got Wi-Fi, you know, if you haven't got phone line, you may have to have a phone line installed so that you can get the broadband. I've heard from other halls have had to do that. But this is an example of a hall that's already been using it for a while. And to date, they've actually had just over £3,500 worth of transactions using the Sum Up. And the transaction fees were £70, 20p. So I've not worked out the percentage, but it's not unreasonable to actually take payments using that method. And in this COVID world at the moment, it's a solution of how people can pay. It may be that as we come out, you may be able to have, say, live and local or some live performances or film shows, and people would be paying at the door. So again, something like the Sum Up would be an ideal, a card reader would be an ideal way of taking that payment. Right, somebody's already using it, Martin's using it. So, but if you're not aware of those, they're a good idea. Right, next slide, Emma. Right, reserves. Obviously, we've been talking about the need for holding reserves, and I would think most halls will have some sort of set reserves in place. there is no set level. So the Charity Commission are not saying you need to have an X% amount in reserves. You know, it isn't set in stone what that level will be, which makes it quite hard, because it comes down to the trustees then to decide what their reserves level should be. They have got to set that target, and they'd need to justify why they are setting that target, or within a range. You know, you don't have to be sort of spot on every year, but you may say we need to have perhaps a reserve of, say, 10-15% per year, and that's what we will aim for. Whether you achieve it every year is another matter. So it's deciding on what is appropriate for your village hall, and it's working out what risks may happen at your hall. If you know that you've got your appropriate insurance cover, you know, that takes out a lot of the risk. But it's for those unforeseen emergencies that you can't really predict, unexpected need, any operational costs that are out of your control, things like that, uncertainty on future income. You may have your major user group suddenly, you know, cancel their booking, and you're suddenly in a position where you thought that you've got this regular income coming in, and suddenly out of the blue that's being taken away. So what would you do? You know, what are the measures that you would put in place if that was going to happen? And if it did happen, have we got enough money in reserves that would keep us going, and for how long? So it's considering how long you might need emergency funding. And you know, you've got to think how your cash flow is going to keep going from month to month. So when you're setting your reserves policy, it's almost like, or your reserves level, it's working with your reserves policy, and also your forward planning, your budgeting. It's all done at the same time. It's looking at what the risks are. What are the what could go wrong? What would we do if the roof suddenly fell in? What would we do if we have to have rewiring and we didn't know? Have we got enough money just as a contingency? So, I mean, certain capital projects you can plan for, and you would probably put that into a restricted fund. So if you knew that you're going to have a new boiler and it's got to be replaced in 5 years' time, you might have a restricted fund and do fundraising for it and keep that, you know, build up that capital funding over time, and you know you're going to spend it for a specific purpose. The reserves fund is slightly different because this is more for unforeseen emergencies. You know, the what if this happens, oh my goodness, rather than fingers crossed it won't happen and you have no reserves, you know, just hoping that these things won't happen and we'll deal with it when it happens. You're better to be prepared. But we can't say you've got to have a set amount. It's for you as trustees to decide what that reserves level you want it to be. So, and you've got to think really, worst case scenario, what would be the risk to our local community if our charity folded? What if we, you know, we had to close because of our mismanagement? So that is the worst case scenario, and that is what you're trying to avoid. So the reserves are really your unrestricted funds that are freely available to spend on any of the charity's purposes if you need to spend it on emergency type of things. When you send the annual report, I think they will ask if you've got a reserves policy. And then if not, I think you have to explain why you haven't got one. So that's important that you do have a reserves policy. Right. I mean, I know of a hall was about 4 years ago in South Derbyshire, and I think suddenly overnight in the corner of the room, the wooden suspended floor suddenly gave way. So they had to close the hall straight overnight. They could not allow any group to go in and use the hall. And it was used by the local school on a daily basis. So it ended up that the Derbyshire Education Department were involved, and they came out and inspected this building, and they said, no, it's not fit. We can't possibly have the children in there. And that was their major income coming in from the school across the road, because they used it every morning. They suddenly stopped using it, and they had this major decision to, you know, how to repair. It was a very old hall anyway, so to spend a lot of money on a brand new floor, they had a lot of decision making to make. But that was an example of when it's good to have a reserves policy in place. So, okay, next page. So we're talking about that forward planning and COVID-19. It's the unknown, as we know. So will the business support grants, which have been quite generous, I think they've kept village halls quite financially stable since the start of the outbreak, with the retail, hotel and leisure grant for £10,000 last year. So that was quite a generous amount. And for a small hall, that would probably keep them going, you know, for the 12 months without having too much impact on the financial stability of the charity. But moving forward, it's the unknown. We don't know how many times we're going to be on a lockdown or on a tier level, what activities we can have and what we can't have. So it's critical that you do that forward planning. If you get into a situation where you think the charity is at real risk and there's an uncertainty of future business support grants, we don't know if the government are going to keep bailing businesses out. It's looking at how you can raise funds locally. So there are things like crowdfunding campaigns, which is an online platform for groups, individuals, charities to say we need money for a specific purpose. So that is an option. Now, parish and town councils, if you are a charity and you are struggling, it might be an idea to talk to the parish council at an early stage and say, because they have got the power to grant money to charitable village halls. So don't be afraid to talk to the parish council or talk through the possibility that, you know, you may be asking them if they can give them some financial support in the future, rather than leave it to the last minute. It's not begging, you don't go begging to the parish council, but it's being upfront, because they do have power to raise money on the precept. And it's the people within that particular parish who would lose out of having a village hall. So even if it was precept money that was going towards giving a bit of financial support to the village hall, they are the people that are the same beneficiaries. They're the people that benefit from, you know, retaining the village hall. So don't be afraid to talk to the parish council. Any local charitable funders, so you can contact the CVS, Council for Voluntary Service, to find out what local funders are that you can perhaps approach. You can contact us at RAD. We know some local funders as well. But there's also a fund that's been set up by the National Lottery, which charities can apply into if they are particularly facing financial hardship. So this is really for critical stages if you're in risk of closure or a risk of folding. So if a village hall was in that situation and they really couldn't afford to pay their bills, and the parish council have helped, but it's still not helping, and you know, you've tried everything else, then there is that National Lottery Fund that you can try as well. But we hope you wouldn't get to that stage. But it is there as a backup rather than fear the risk of having a village hall that closes. Right, next slide. I hope that you are all accessing the business support grants that are out there. The one for this third lockdown, the current one, is called the Closed Businesses Lockdown Payment, which came into force for lockdown from the 5th of January. And if you were eligible for the Retail, Hotel and Leisure grant, for the £10,000 grant back in the first lockdown, you were definitely eligible for this one again. So don't think that will we get it a second time? It is for the same purposes. So do apply online on your local authority's website. But as you know, we're in lockdown, and it is for businesses that have had to close, but some halls are still open for preschools, maybe providing some medical services from the village hall. For the list of things that you can open for, it does not mean that you can't apply for the grant, because you are in essence closed for business, but you are providing just the key essential services that are required by the local community. So they cannot penalise you as a village hall for the fact that you are providing these essential services. So you would still be eligible to apply for this. So that's the list of the grants that are being awarded this time round. First time round, there was quite a lot of confusion with village halls saying, well, we're not in the business rate system, we don't pay business rates. That's not the case. All village halls will have a rateable value. Charitable village halls will have a rateable value, but you may be exempt from paying it, but it doesn't mean you haven't got a rateable value. Church halls are slightly different, statutory halls are slightly different, and they would have to apply for the discretionary grants that the local authorities have been, it's a different amount and it's at the discretion of the local authority. So I know, for example, at Clifton, it is a church hall, it's not classed as a village hall. But at Etwall, it is a charitable hall, even though it's managed by the parish council. It is a charitable hall, so they should get the closed business lockdown payment. So any issues, any problems with that, please do get in touch with RAD. It did cause confusion the first time round, and we had to sometimes, quite a few times, I had to get in contact with local authorities and explain the variables in different types of community buildings. So don't be afraid to get in contact with it. It would be a shame if you really do miss out on some of the funds that you're entitled to. There was also funding which you can still apply for when it was in the tier levels. So when we were in tier level, I might be wrong, but I'm definitely for tier level 4, maybe for tier level 3, I can't remember now. Tier level 4, there was definitely funding available. So when you go on the website, there will be things like local restriction support grant and additional restriction support grant. Can I just ask, as a ballpark, have any of you applied for this latest package for the third lockdown or for the local tier levels?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Did you find that the local authorities contacted you, or did they expect you to just apply online anyway?
Contacted us.
They did. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had to apply.
Yeah.
We had to keep watching the Amber Valley website for it to come up and then apply.
Yeah. It's difficult because each local authority in the county has been doing it slightly differently, and they've opened their grants at different times and they'll have different deadlines. So I can't be generic on these. You have to go by what your local authority is, how they're handling the grants. But do not be afraid to contact them or contact us if you're having problems with it. So, and I know there are one or two that have fallen through the net and didn't receive funding the first time round that should have, if they'd known what they were doing, should have got that money. £10,000 is a lot of money. So, we're just so keen that everybody gets the money that they're entitled to. So any questions on the business support grants?
Yeah, I've just sent you on a chat Our
Okay.
treasurer died after the first grant was given. Where do we apply for subsequent grants? Because we haven't had any extra ones.
Okay, that's Hathersage, did you say?
Yeah.
Ha-
Derbyshire
yeah.
Dale.
Sorry, Derbyshire Dales.
Yeah.
So it's the Derby. If they've sent a letter to the treasurer, obviously the treasurer's moved away. I don't. So you have to. Can you contact the treasurer to find if they've had
No,
any?
I'm sorry, he's died.
Oh, died.
Yeah,
Gosh, it
yeah.
might be an idea that you contact the business rating system to
Right.
let you know the new contact for the hall. Because anything to do with business rates, they'll be sending that to the wrong person, or person's
Okay.
unfortunately passed away.
Yeah.
So it'll be going to the wrong address. So sometimes the rating system don't know how to get in contact with the village hall itself.
So that's rating system at Derbyshire Dales.
Yeah, but that's that's if a letter's going out. But the way you apply is go onto the website, Heather,
Yeah.
and look at COVID-19 business support grants.
Okay.
But could I say there that I'm looking at the grant system for Starcombs Village Hall. We certainly missed out on the £10,000 grant. I'm trying to catch up on the 4,000 one now. But when I look at the Derbyshire Dales website, so it may be relevant for you, Heather, as far as I can see, all the applications are being invited by email week commencing the 11th of Jan. So I'm trying to access into Derbyshire Dales to see why we haven't got an email, how we do get in touch with somebody there. At the moment, I haven't really had any great success. It's just being bounced around within the council.
This is Bonsall, isn't it?
No, it's Starcombs.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Starkholmes. Okay. Yeah. It may be that the first time round, they hadn't got the right contact details for your hall. So maybe a letter had gone out and it had just hit the wrong household, the wrong person. So if you are a charitable hall, just a typical village hall charity, you're paying no rates, but
Right.
you have a rateable value. You would have been entitled to that. So that's quite unfortunate that I don't think you can go back and apply for that now, but
No,
you can ask the question.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can now retrospectively get that grant.
I think
So what you need to do is find your rateable number. Even though you're not paying rates, you should have a rateable number for your property.
Yep,
that was a huge barrier the first time round. People tried to apply, then they said, we don't have a rates number. They didn't realise they had a rates number. So if you've got that to hand, I would go on to the Derbyshire Dales COVID business support webpage, and you can apply online.
Not for CBLP.
Are there not? Is there no online application on the?
No.
Okay. Do you want me to follow that one up for you then?
I would appreciate it if you would.
I can do. Yeah, and it's Starkholme Village Hall. Hall. Okay. Yeah. I will make the inquiry about retrospective paying. I don't think they will, but it's worth asking. I can't see why you should be entitled for the closed business knockdown payment. So
reference.
You would get some money.
Yeah. My account reference is 7009 3797.
Okay. That's your rateable number, your business rate.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. We'll leave that one with me.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Anybody else got problems with it? Because you're from different parts of the county as well. So each, different local authorities have got a different system. Okay.
We had problems with, it's Joy. We had no problems with the first first payment with the £10,000. That was really straightforward. It's High Peak's website. It was great. But this current one, I'm actually not dealing with it. Another trustee is, and he's been ringing me up saying, I can't find anything. And eventually he had to email the authority, and he has just got through and is getting somewhere, hopefully. But it was a real mess, this one, whereas the previous one was very plain sailing.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I've not heard of anybody who's actually got, oh, I have actually, yes. Somebody emailed me from Amber Valley at Horsley, and he was expecting the 4,000 payment, and he had a cheque for over 6,000. So, and he was wondering why, and I said, well, I know why it will be. They will have paid the hall, the closed business lockdown payment, and anything that they were entitled to during the tier level. So the local restriction support grant. So I don't think he applied for that. I'm not sure, but they may have automatically paid it him because they're entitled to a payment as well as the closed business support grant. Does that make sense? So he ended up with more money than he was actually expecting to get. So it just depends on if you're invited, follow the instructions for your particular local authority area. Or the instructions on the website, because they vary from local authority, you know, wherever you live, it just varies how they're handling it. There's no consistency particularly with it, even though they have to follow government guidance. It's up to the local authority how they administer it. And of course, if it comes to a church hall or a statutory managed hall, then the grants that they can apply for are down to the discretion of the local authority. So again, discretion, say in South Derbyshire, may be different completely to Amber Valley or another area. You know, there's no consistency. It's down to the discretion of the local authority how much they want to pay to church halls and statutory halls. So it varies. It just depends what sort of governance structure the hall is. But charity halls are pretty much, they've got these standard set amounts, so they know in advance how much they're entitled to. Okay, well, it's about 12 o'clock, so timing's not been too bad. I'm sorry it's been a bit rushed. There is the information sheet accounting for village halls, if anybody was interested in that. They are £10 plus VAT. I will send information around about the boss accounts, the easy accounts, that package that we had a look at, that example. Emma will send the slides around. You'll get that perhaps in a couple of days' time. And any queries or information or follow-up that people have, if they've, you know, suddenly thought of a question that you've not thought about today, you know, by all means email that in and we'll try and answer any questions. Any issues with the grants, it'd be good to know the outcome of, you know, good luck stories as well as problems. So if you do get the funding, it's nice to hear where it's working well. And I think we've got just a couple of minutes. Emma, do we want to just talk about, because it's Village Halls Week and it's a centenary year, there's an initiative that Acre has set up, and it's asking halls to sign a doomsday book. Because, and Emma's going to show you how you can do that. So this is on the Acre website. And it's just been made available this week, the Village Halls Week. And it was launched by Lord Gardner of Kimble, Under Secretary of State for Rural Affairs and Biosecurity, it says there. He's a great advocate for village halls. He's done a lot to lobby government on behalf of Acre. And he helped to get things like the DEFRA Village Hall Improvement Grant Fund that was available to halls in 2019. And they're trying to lobby on things like VAT, trying to get rid of the VAT element on extension.
Great.
Like that. So, and if you scroll down, Emma, because it tells you can sign there, and all they're asking you to do is perhaps just put a little bit of a comment in there. Oh yeah, Emma's got it, yeah. So it's the name of the hall, where you're located, any comment. It could be, we've just had a fantastic extension. We've just built a new hall, or we are planning to have blah, blah, blah in the future. It doesn't matter. It's just like a sentence or a paragraph. Anything that you want to put in there is a comment. And then when it says feeling with the thumbprints there, thumbs up, it's just a generic feeling, how you are feeling as a charity. Are you feeling very positive? Are you feeling very negative and doom and gloom for the future? So if you think, yes, we're all rosy, we're fine, it's in lockdown, but we're okay, you know, it's just a way of how you are feeling as a charity at this. It's a snapshot in time, basically. That's what they're trying to capture. There's an option to upload any sort of image, and Emma will show you in a minute an example of the ones that have already signed the Doomsday Book. You can put a link to your website, and then that's just a consent button agreeing to ACRE putting the information on their website and making it available to the public. I think it's got off to a really good start. So Emma's scrolling down, show you some of the examples. So that's a Derbyshire one. The Arkwright Centre have signed it. Ashover, Derbyshire Hall there. It's some nice pictures of different styles, and you see that's an internal picture of a wedding layout. Don't have to be the external picture. So we've got a wedding layout. I think Tansley's on there somewhere, I noticed.
Well, it's an alphabetical order, so we're only on C.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll scroll all the way down to T.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think I looked yesterday, and there's a heck of a lot more gone on since yesterday.
Yeah, but what's encouraging is that there's lots of thumbs up. Not many halls are feeling too gloomy at the moment, so that's encouraging.
I think it's a lovely idea. It's a snapshot. It's a centenary year, and also the more people that sign it, it's a record for the future. And it's a bit of that evidence as well, because ACRE are forever lobbying central government, and something like this is say, look, we've got this, record of how village halls are feeling, and these are pictures and images and examples of village halls across the country. You know, it's just sort of giving you a louder voice when it comes to policy making. There was the ACRE national survey that was published at the end of last year, and that's done every 10 years. So again, when they're lobbying government, they've got that evidence base of what's happened in village halls, the trends from this time 10 years ago. I think it was the fourth. So that's been going on for 40 years. They've done this every year. So things like that, initiatives like that, and signing the Doomsday Book, it's just a way of keeping it fresh in people's minds how valuable these assets are to local communities. So it's up to you, but if you do find the time to do it, that would be really quite a nice thing to do.
You can get to the Doomsday Book to sign it via our website. If you go onto what we do, scroll down to Community Buildings Advisory Service, and then that will take you onto here, and you'll be able to see all of the information relevant to village and community halls. Okay.
Yes, there's a lot of social media as well with Village Halls Week. So if you do follow RAD or ACRE, or you have your own social media, then they're asking you nationally to post anything about your village hall, any good comments. It's a good way of advertising. Then just pass the message, hashtag. Emma knows how you do all these social media things. So
yeah, hashtag Village Halls Week for anything to do with village halls.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
And if any halls are on Twitter or Facebook, then please look out for Rural Action Derbyshire and give us a like or a follow.
Right. Any last questions then, in light of the fact that we're in lockdown? Anything you would want to share? Any experiences, or has anybody been approached, for example, about a vaccination centre? Has anybody?
Yes, we have. We have.
You have. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know, but someone was taken around yesterday to look at it.
Right. That's interesting to know. Yes. So who contacted you then, Heather? Was it the?
I don't know.
No.
The booking secretary took them round. So he just said that he'd been approached, and I was taking somebody round.
Yeah.
I think we would be interested to know if they do go ahead with that, Heather. And
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Yeah, because
Okay.
it might be interesting to get your story that we can then share with other halls if they're approached.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
I think Ashover was just saying that I think they've been contacted as a possibility, but they've not yet gone and had a look. But it's interesting to know that they are being approached.
I mean, presumably a lot of it will be dependent on the size of the village hall, won't it? That it's actually a practical sort of space that they can use.
Yeah.
I mean, Bonsall is very small, so it wouldn't really be sort of suited to that sort of thing, I wouldn't have thought. But
I think it'd be things like accessibility, and I think Bonsall's not a very good accessible hall, maybe.
That's one of the problems we have.
So,
hopefully going to rectify,
Yeah, but I would imagine, I mean, Hathersage is quite a large community. Ashover is quite a lot. They're not small villages.
No.
But it may be that they're going to go for like a large village, and then there's a cluster of smaller villages that can then go into that more central point, like Hathersage or Ashover. So it may be the smaller villages are not going to be approached.
And we had to make sure that there was a one-way system available.
Yeah, it's got to be COVID secure.
Yeah.
They'll make sure that if you've got all those procedures in place.
Yeah.
If not, they'll have to, insist that they're in place.
Yeah.
There was a hall down in Berkshire that did this 3 or 4 weeks ago when they started the vaccinations, and it was a bit of a trial run. And it was opposite to the doctor's surgery, so it was ideally located, to be honest. So they could use it readily. But the key problem they found that so many people were descending on the building that the car park hadn't got the capacity. So there's car parking issues. So people coming and going, you're not like parking and staying there for 2 hours. You're parking there for say 15, 20 minutes. So there's a lot of coming and going. So they found that difficult to manage. And people on foot. So there's all these people arriving at quite, short time periods. So it's managing that flow they found was a problem. So whether Ashover, Hathersage, you've got various rooms. You may have people going in one door and maybe exiting another door. And I think because people have to sit waiting 15 minutes after they've had their jab. So it's having that capacity. It's all right doing them, the injections can be done really quickly, but then you've got to manage people staying socially distant, sat down.
We have 3 halls, so it wouldn't be a problem.
Hathersage would be ideal. Yeah. Okay. Well, interesting. So we don't quite know how it's going to be rolled out. But anything else to do with Village Halls Week? Look at the news bulletin. I sent one out, I think, on beginning of the week. So if you want to find out what's going on, there have been some online events that ACRE have been running as well. So I'm going to find out if they're going to be recorded, and if we can access them subsequently, that will be good as well. There's one going on at the moment, so we've missed out on that one. If we can get a copy of it, then we might make that, if we can make it available on the RAD website or direct you to the ACRE website, that would be interesting. Okay, I think we're about finished, and we're just over 12 o'clock, aren't we now? So thank you very much for joining us, and do email in if you've got any follow-up questions.
And as Helena said, we'll be in touch, send out a PDF of the slides and a link to the recording.